Hello, YouTube, Internet, world. Welcome back to another episode of Dime Store Cinema on the road. Let's talk movies. Today, I would like to discuss Nicholas Winding Refn's newest film, The Neon Demon. This is a very polarizing film. And I would say understandably so, based on the content and then also the way in which it's filmed. So, on the surface, this is a movie about an aspiring model who goes to the city to get discovered and become a model and become the best model, and about her corruption at the hands of jaded, cynical people. And that's the surface level. If you're just sitting down and watching it and taking it at face value as a straightforward movie. Now, if that's the way you watch this film and you try to watch it as just a straight normal narrative structure, then I would say that most of you would either not like it or find it to be not particularly thoughtful. If you watch it in that way, it's very on the nose, just retreading story types that we've seen a million times before. This one would look better than most others that have been made, but a very overused plot, I would say. Or maybe not overused, but just very familiar plot. However, I would say that is not necessarily the correct way to watch this movie. I would say that this movie is meant to be experienced the same way that you would experience a piece of modern art that you go to the museum to look at. And one of the ways in which that's accomplished is that if you really sit down and watch the film and try to figure out who the protagonist is, and you analyze it in that regard, you start to realize that the protagonist in the movie is the audience. And everyone else in the movie is the antagonist. You start to realize that the perspective of the film is the audience. It's not the characters. It's particularly not Elle Fanning's character. Because the whole movie is the audience discovering things about her. It's not about her own self-discovery. It's about the audience discovering who she is. Now, that being said, I've heard lots of different theories on this, and this is one of the movies where there are lots of theories and many people talking about many different things and coming up with varied conclusions. So, I mean, in all probability, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that the Neon Demon, the title, is actually referring to Elle Fanning. It's not referring to, as I've heard some people say, LA or Hollywood or fame or any of the perceived antagonists of the movie. I would say that the Neon Demon is in fact referring to Elle Fanning. If you look at it in the terms of what a demon is, according to the lore of demonology, as it were, Demons are beings that tempt. They're beings that tempt the righteous and also the unrighteous. They are deceivers, they are conniving, they are intelligent, and they are beautiful. So the idea of Elle Fanning being the Neon Demon is the fact that her name is in lights as the movie progresses, and she is the personification of desire. She is what everyone aspires to be. Everyone in that industry aspires to be young and naturally beautiful. That is what everyone works for throughout this entire movie. That's what multiple characters say is the most defining and important factor of a person. And she is the embodiment of it. And because of her just being, she entices others to do despicable and horrible things, to go to extremes that that most people wouldn't think possible. And in that, I think that people need to realize that this movie, I believe, is meant to be taken very metaphorically. It's not meant to be a literal narrative story. It's meant to be seen and experienced. And that's something that the director, Nicholas Winding Refn, is very good at. He's very good at presenting a story visually. This one, I think, is the one that he maybe does that the most with. Maybe Only God Forgives does it more. But the idea is that every scene that he constructs in this movie is essentially a painting, as it were, that the audience is meant to look at, and rather than the story being shown or told to them, they're supposed to infer it through the visuals. I think because of that, there have been many people who've compared this to a very long music video, which I would say that's not necessarily a criticism if you're looking at movies as mediums of telling stories. Nowhere does it say, or should it say, that movies have to follow a normal narrative structure or even a perceived understanding of method. As long as a story is conveyed, and it is conveyed well, and is conveyed in a way that elicits a response from the audience, that movie has succeeded at telling a story. And this movie succeeds at telling a story. In fact, it succeeds well enough that many people have seen many different stories from watching the same film. Some people on a negative, toward the negative, and some people toward the positive. And I think that it'll be one or the other. This is the type of movie that typically results in an impassioned response. I don't think you'll have as many people saying, "Oh, this is just all right." I think, and I haven't seen all of Refn's films, so I don't know, but I know that in the films that I've seen Drive, Only God Forgives, Neon Demon, and Bronson. I think Bronson is the most traditionally filmed that I've seen. Only God Forgives is probably the most experimental, at least conceptually, that I've seen. Drive, I think, is the most narrative-driven, and this one is definitely the most visually driven. So I think that it's important to enjoy the film. I think it's important to really approach it as everyone being a symbolizing something, as opposed to being a character. They're more of a caricature. They're more of a an archetype that is filled. And I think that really helps you understand what the story is going for. It is trying to convey the desire of a vain industry leading to unspeakable cruelty, and how LA and Hollywood will just eat you up. And in this movie, literally, not spoilers, but Elle Fanning gets eaten in the film, and it is a bit on the nose, but at the same time it's shocking. But it's so on the nose that something so shocking has happened, that it almost softens the blow, almost, because it's such a literalization of the metaphor that it's almost comical. But at the same time, it's not filmed comedically at all. It's very disturbing. But I think that's another level that makes it a little more necessary to view as a metaphorical piece. Because, I mean, I've heard lots of theories about how the women who eat Elle Fanning's character are a coven of witches, and the mountain lion that's in Elle Fanning's room is one of them, who is a shapeshifter, and that kind of thing. And I mean, that's fine, and I guess I've even some people are saying that it's a vampire film. If you look at vampires in the loose definition of what a vampire is, I think that's fine, and that's a fine way of watching the movie, and it's visually stimulating enough that I think you can get away with that and still enjoy it. But I don't think that is the best way to watch it. I think it's better to watch this movie as an indictment of, I mean, of course you're going to anyway. I mean, that's very obvious in the movie, but a satirical indictment of the industry by using archetypes to show something. And then, as I was saying earlier, with Elle Fanning being the neon demon, I've heard many people talk about how towards the end of the film, there's the moment when she's given the closing of the fashion show, and it's a big honor, and a lot of people see the mirror scene and the change of her face and everything like that as her becoming something, as opposed to what I say, that she has always been that, and at that moment, that's when the facade is gone. That's when she has gotten to the point where she no longer needs to put on airs. She is now visible to the audience, like I said earlier, the audience being, in fact, the protagonist of this film, the onlooker, the perspective for whom the movie is shot. and there are a lot of different reasons I say that. I mean, one is the fact that they're through her actions and through her just appearing at these auditions, a young child with no family who's run away, and it kind of suggests that there is something going on underneath there. And then, of course, the way that she responds to every person, she uses everyone. She doesn't actually invest in anyone. She uses everyone that she is around. And then when she is done with them, you see glimpses of what her character actually is. Every single one of the characters, you see this. And so this makes me think that there isn't this moment of her changing. It's this, we are gradually given a door is gradually opened for us to see who she really is. And I think that's a really clever way of making this film, and it made me enjoy the film a little bit more than if it was just in her perspective and it was about her journey and her downfall. I like the idea that she was already this person, this demon, if you will, and the movie is just the unfolding of us realizing it. So I think that's interesting. I definitely want to talk about how beautiful this film is. It is an absolute joy to watch, just visually. Even if thematically there are elements that make it not necessarily pleasant to sit down and watch, but as far as craftsmanship of visuals, it's top notch. And once again, going into visual storytelling, a movie this beautiful that also is able to convey and elicit an emotional response in the audience through visuals is just that is the brilliant part of the film, more so than the story, more so than the satire, more so than the way in which the story unfolds. What is brilliant about the film is that is the way that it's made and the competence that has gone into creating these visuals. And I mean, I love it because it puts me in the mind of a postmodern silent film. And I love silent films, so watching a movie like this that relies so much on the visual aspect of things and subtle changes in facial expressions and in lighting and color and all of these things, it fascinates me. It makes me geek out because it reminds me so much of silent films. So it has that aspect as well. And then of course you have the music that is used, which definitely puts you in the mind of the fashion industry in the 80s, which was, regardless of the truth of this, it is the cultural understanding that this is the most decadent, the most corrupt era in fashion and in Hollywood. It was a time of cocaine and a time of overindulgence and a time of people just selling their souls. So I think that he was invoking our cultural understanding of that time period to elicit a specific emotion about what we were watching and kind of hint to us how we were supposed to understand the satire that was going on, how we were supposed to understand how we were supposed to feel about the industry. So I thought that was a really good use of music. I thought it was a subtle way, once again, of storytelling without actually telling the story. It was a story that was inferred by the feelings that were evoked. So I think that in that case, this film is brilliant. And I don't want to just say, oh, this film is brilliant, and have people think that I think that it's this like deep and provocative and thought-provoking story, or on the surface level. It's brilliant because he was able to tell a story, or like he was able to imply a story that was so much more interesting and evocative and deep than the story that he told. So, which I think you can maybe say that it's an overabundance of subtext without enough text. I think you could use that as a criticism of this film. But with so many movies that we watch that have absolutely no subtext at all, I found it very refreshing to see something that had a lot of subtext to it. It's something that we don't see nearly enough of. And I will say that Only God Forgives definitely has way more, and it's way more subtle in its storytelling and much more difficult to understand thematically. So this one I think might be a little more accessible to someone who's trying to get into like an art house filmmaking. But yeah, and then I guess the one other thing I wanted to talk about, because I've heard a lot of different theories on it and a lot of different people talking about what it could mean, and that's spoilers once again. There's this scene where one of the characters that eats her, after she has eaten her, she lies down on the ground in front of a large window with a full moon predominantly in the frame of the window. And she lies down, and then a large pool of blood starts pooling around her. And I've heard a lot of different things, people saying that it's period blood, which is tying into her being the mother figure of Elle Fanning's character, and now that she has consumed her, it's kind of like a symbolism of a corrupt mother, or even a symbolism of rebirth of the character, or in some fashion like that. Or I've heard people saying that it's more of like a Freudian sexual thing, where she finally gets Elle Fanning inside of her, referring back to earlier in the film when she tries to force herself on Elle Fanning, and then has a sexual fantasy of Elle Fanning while doing unpleasant things to a cadaver that she is doing makeup for. Yeah, there's a lot of crazy, messed up stuff in this movie. I don't mean to gloss over those things, but those aren't the things that interest me about the film. Once again, I think that his point is that he is showing that people will go to extreme lengths to achieve, or to have, or to consume or to be their ideal, which Elle Fanning is the representation of. So there's a lot of very extreme behavior, particularly toward her, because she is the object of their desire. Whether or not she is personally, she is the embodiment of their desire, which leads to cannibalism, which, like I said earlier, is the very on the nose way of saying this town is going to eat you alive. Yes. Which leads into the very end, and I'll get to that after I talk about the whole moon and everything. And I don't know what to make of this scene specifically. I mean, I think that it ties into the whole mother role that she was kind of taking. I think it is along those lines, but I'm not sure exactly. I would welcome any comments that you guys have, giving your theories. I've heard several, as I mentioned. But I'm not really sure how to make it. I kind of look at it as sort of a rebirth of her character. Her character is kind of presented in the light of like an Elizabeth Bathory, like a Blood Countess kind of thing. And it's kind of blurring the lines of whether or not she's a supernatural character, if she's just not, or once again, as I like to do it, she's just a metaphor of that archetype, which is, you know, the leader of the pack, as it were, the alpha woman, which I've heard a lot of people complain that she was sexually she was a sexually aggressive lesbian, which in the complaints that I've heard, they say that, you know, that's how lesbians are always portrayed. They're, you know, which I don't necessarily agree with. Whereas that has appeared in films, I don't know if I agree with that's the norm, that lesbians are portrayed as sexually aggressive, or any more sexually aggressive than straight women in films that are sexually aggressive, because they're also the sexually submissive. But usually, I guess, there's usually one of each. There's the aggressive and the submissive. But I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that whole thing, and I don't want to get into really that type of social issues, because I don't think this movie is necessarily talking about that. I don't necessarily think that it's trying to be a feminist movie like some people have said. I'm sure maybe that was on the back of his mind, but I think that it's more just meant to be an art piece that is a scathing indictment of the industry that Refn himself is a part of. So, very end of the movie, spoilers big time. So, there are 3 women who eat Elle Fanning. One of them is, as I said, lies down on the floor by the moonlight, and we see the pool of blood around her. The other 2 go to a photo shoot. The one girl starts freaking out, and she cuts her own stomach open to get Elle Fanning out of her body. And then the other woman picks up one of the pieces that was still undigested, and she eats it. A tear rolls down her eyes, and then she goes off to be in the photo shoot that she wasn't even supposed to be in. The photographer liked the way she looked and chose to put her into it, suggesting that this wicked, over-the-top action that she has done is resulting in her getting what she has worked so hard for. So I think this is kind of pointing out once again at the archetypes of the people who do horrible, despicable things to succeed, and you have the people who burn out and can't take it anymore and go crazy and, you know, turn to drugs and just ruin their lives. This girl or cut herself open. And then you have the other person who may regret what they've done or even sympathize with their friend, but at the end of the day, they've already done those things and now they need to continue on. So I think that it's good that it didn't show them as that the character as being remorseless, but at the same time, she didn't turn her back to what she was doing. She continued on. So I think that goes more into the characters being archetypes. It points at those, you know, those two types of people who, you know, claw to the top. Some people can't deal with that, and some people force themselves to. In any case, yeah, so that's my review of Neon Demon. I don't know if I forgot anything or not. There's so much to unpack in this movie, and there are a lot of other scenes that have been discussed and theorized, and all of a lot of talking, and a lot of people just going way overboard and looking way too deeply at this, I think. But you know, like I said, I think that it's an art piece. I think it's meant to be experienced like a piece of art, and I think that it's meant to be a metaphor. I think that it's meant to be a satirical metaphor, and I think that's the best way to watch it. But feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to watch it in any way that you want to, enjoy it any way you want to, or don't enjoy it. It's fine. It's a movie. You can like it if you want to. I won't hold it against you. I am fine with people liking whatever they like. In any case, thank you all for watching. I will see you next time.